Welcome to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, family? Welcome to the very first episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Let's go. You have no idea how excited I am to finally share this podcast with you. I even got dressed up for you. And just to be clear, please don't expect this for every episode. But look, y'all, my friend told me this. It's about starting off this podcast journey on the right foot. So look good, play good, as the saying goes. But besides the dress, and if you're listening to the sound of my voice wherever you are, I need to keep it real with you. I've been deeply disillusioned by society's steady slide into meanness and unkindness over the past few years. For the past few months in particular, all I wanted to do is put on my Enya playlist on repeat. Real talk. I'm sure there's someone listening to the sound of my voice who rocks with Enya besides me. Anyway, listen to Enya, hide underneath my covers, shovel cookie dough ice cream in my face, and just rock back and forth in the fetal position, just muttering curse words under my breath. In other words, y'all, I felt helpless. But here's the truth. I'm not helpless, and neither are you. And if you're anything like me and you desperately want to create a kinder world, I promise you, no one is coming to save us. I know that sounds kind of scary, but this is good news for us. The hero that we're waiting for is in the bathroom mirror. We do have agency to do something meaningful about this, to turn this around, and that's exactly why I created this podcast. Consider this my effort to restore balance in an extremely unbalanced world. I believe deeply in kindness, and I plan on using this space on this podcast to present my indisputable case that kindness has the power to change the world. I know what you might be thinking though. This corny brother right here thinks the answer to our problems is to braid a friendship bracelet for my narcissistic sociopath of a boss. What's next, bruh? Mailing edible arrangements to neo-Nazis who don't acknowledge my humanity or my right to exist in peace? Miss me with this BS, son? I personally love an edible arrangement as much as anyone. But no, that is not what I'm saying. Not only is that stupid, more importantly, it's dangerous. I plan on making a much more cogent, practical, and science-based case for kindness in this podcast, I promise you. Speaking of which, since this is the very, very first episode of this podcast, this format for this particular episode will be very different from the standard format I'm using for following episodes. The reason for this is that I need to use episode 1 of this podcast to present my case to you as to why you should stick with me throughout this experiment. Specifically, there's 3 questions that I want to answer in this debut episode. The first question is, who am I? You need to know who I am and if I'm worthy of listening to, of course. Second, what should you expect from this podcast? Very important. And third, why is it so urgent for us to take action now? There's so much to cover. So without any further ado, let's dive into the first question. Who in the heck am I? As you already know, my name is Shola Richards. I'm a husband, proud girl dad who lives in sunny Southern California. And in case you're wondering, Shola is an African name, West African name, Yoruba, if you want to get really specific. Shola means one who is blessed. Isn't my name cute? Thanks. I got it for my birthday. All right. Besides being a dad joke enthusiast, I've been called many things in my life. An author, professional speaker, workplace consultant. But the title that I love the most, the one that stuck with me over the years that I wear most proudly, is Brother Teresa. Why? Because I've dedicated the rest of my natural life to making the world a kinder place, and I won't apologize for my extreme position on kindness. In fact, that's why I'm called a kindness extremist. That's why this podcast is called the Kindness Extremist Podcast, because I will not rest until bullying incivility, and other forms of unkindness are extinct from this world. It's also important to note that I'm known as what's called an HSP, which stands for a highly sensitive person or an empath. You can use either one of those terms interchangeably, which is a fancy way of saying that I feel things very deeply. And it may sound lovely to experience the emotions of the world so vividly, and it is, until it's not. Personally speaking, man, when I witness or experience heartless, violent, hateful, and cruel behavior, I literally, I'm not saying this figuratively, I literally lose sleep over this stuff. I have always held on more deeply to the things that have hurt me than the things that have brought me joy and happiness. And sadly, I know that I'm not alone in this. My position on kindness is extreme because I've seen the extreme outcomes of unkindness on my life personally. Specifically, nearly 20 years ago, while working in a profoundly toxic work environment, I fell into a very deep depression. And I'm not using that term euphemistically. I wasn't saying I was sad. I was deeply depressed. And sadly, it became so dark for me that I believe that the only escape was for me to take my own life. So one morning while driving on the 405 freeway here in Los Angeles, I made a decision to attempt to violently crash my car while speeding off the freeway in an attempt to make it look like an accident. For reasons that I will never quite understand, during my attempt, the guardrail on the freeway held firm, and with extreme gratitude, I'm still here. That experience fundamentally changed me and set me on a path to make kindness the norm in how we work, how we live, and how we lead. If I have to live in this world where I feel emotions so deeply, then instead of hating this experience, and quite frankly, plenty of days I do, I decided that I might as well spend the rest of my life working to alleviate the emotional suffering of myself and of others while I'm alive and able to do so. I want to be painfully clear about something though. I'm not coming to this podcast as some hero or some guru, because I promise you that I'm neither. I'm deeply broken in many ways, and I have no problem sharing that or admitting that here on this podcast. I struggle with depression. When I see racism, intolerance, injustice, and general mean-spiritedness, I privately ask myself, what in the hell is the point of this human experience? Real talk, hopelessness, and helplessness are frequent and unwelcome visitors in my life. Still though, I'm here. This podcast, in a sense, is part of my accountability work to ensure that I stay locked in on my dream of creating a kinder world. Okay, enough about me. Now that you know who I am, let's get to the second question. What can you expect from this Kindness Extremist podcast? Hey, fellow Kindness Extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. First of all, this will be a solo podcast. This is to be you and me having a conversation about how kindness affects everything from our mental health to our political well-being, to our families, to our communities, to our workplaces, how we get educated, literally everything. Kindness is the through line that's going to connect us in these episodes. Each episode will run about 30 minutes in duration, about 20 to 30 minutes. Let's kind of give a little range. We'll focus on practical takeaways. The reason for this is super simple. You're busy. You might not have the time to listen to multiple hours of content. My goal is to remove all barriers to entry when it comes to learning how to create a kinder world. Here's my pledge to you. If you give me 30 minutes each week, in return, I'll give you 3 specific and actionable strategies that you can implement immediately after listening. I'm not interested in fluffy platitudes or vague inspirational quotes or any of that silliness. I'm here hoping to change lives, or more specifically, change behavior in the shortest amount of time possible. The world is a hot mess right now, and we don't have time to waste. Specifically in this podcast, each episode, we're going to tackle really deeply challenging topics like politics, abortion, or immigration, for instance. How to address workplace toxicity, how to deal with bias and intolerance like racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, or Islamophobia, how to recognize and address the alarming rise in misinformation and disinformation. We'll talk about the importance of critical thinking and how that plays a key role in creating a kinder world. We'll talk about strategies to enhance our mental health and resilience during these really wild times. We'll even explore the restorative power of forgiveness with people who have profoundly hurt us. This is a lot. I get it. If you're sitting here thinking, damn, Shola, I wasn't thinking we were going to go that deep. Okay? I thought we were going to be talking about kindness. We're going to be talking about things like how to smile bigger and how to have happier thoughts while the world is circling the drain. Oh dear. Yeah. We're not going to do that. Sorry to disappoint you. What we're going to dive into is the upper level curricula in this particular podcast. In other words, we're going to the deep end with the hard, often uncomfortable stuff that most people want to avoid. That is what this podcast is specifically going to be about. In fact, this is the perfect time to make a very clear distinction. When I talk about kindness, I'm not talking about being nice. Those are two very different things. And from this point forward, please do not use the words kind and nice interchangeably. There are two totally different things. Nice, by definition, means being polite and agreeable. And can we hopefully agree that that is a super low bar? Think of the worst human being you know. This should not take very long. You got this person in your head? Okay. I guarantee you that this person can squeak out a please or a thank you once in a while. Some of the meanest and most hateful people in the world have the capacity to be nice. Being nice certainly has its place, but in terms of meaningfully changing the world, which is what I'm hoping to do in this podcast, it's one of the most overrated strategies ever. Let's put the hateful people aside for a moment and let's just talk about nice people. You know the one thing that many nice people have in common? They often avoid the necessary behaviors that improve society, such as having difficult conversations, holding people accountable, honoring themselves, or standing up for others for fear of rocking the boat or appearing impolite. That's not going to serve us as we do this work. Even worse than that, here's another annoying trait of people who choose niceness. Niceness is the birthplace of passive aggressiveness. You know this is true. It's like when a colleague says, wow, you actually did a decent job in your presentation to the team this morning. It's way better than the presentation you gave to the team last week. It's so lovely to see that you're finally improving. Bless your heart. What is that? Kindness, on the other hand, thankfully, is about demonstrating through our actions that we genuinely care about another human being. Kindness comes from a place of sincere benevolence, and it is significantly harder than sprinkling niceties around. Kind people have difficult conversations. Kind people stand up to intolerance. Kind people respectfully communicate their needs. Kind people have firm boundaries. Kind people tell others that their actions are harming another human being. Most of all, kind people give a damn about problems that do not affect them personally. It is kind to take action to create a better world for everyone. Kindness, unlike niceness, is hard work. And please trust, in this podcast, I'm going to ask you to engage in some very hard work. This broken world will not be healed with half-assed nice energy. For anyone foolish enough to believe that kindness is weakness, that is a surefire tell that they don't have a real understanding of what kindness truly is. In our extremely polarized world, kindness is one of the most surefire demonstrations of strength in existence. As humans, we are hardwired to fear people whom we perceive to be different from us. Offering compassion, goodwill, altruism to others whom we perceive to be different from us is an uncommon act these days, and it's something that the weakest among us lack the courage and conviction to do consistently. Let me just bottom line this. If you're struggling between the difference between nice and kind, let me give you something that you remember forever. Nice is something that we do. Kind is something that we are. Real kindness is how we're going to change the world. And real kindness, not niceness, is what we'll be covering in every episode of this podcast. Why do we need this podcast now? In a world where keyboard gangsters are launching hateful tirades from the safety of their connected devices, where political polarization is fracturing family dinners all throughout our country, where people have ulcers and crippling anxiety on Sunday as they prepare for the work week ahead, Where public discourse is devolving into shouting matches and middle finger discourse rather than thoughtful exchanges, kindness has never been more vital or, quite frankly, more endangered. If you're going to be honest with yourself, the evidence of our inability to be kind is overwhelming and impossible to ignore as you're listening to the sound of my voice on this podcast episode. Teachers, healthcare professionals, library employees, election poll workers, flight attendants, and public servants are all being viciously harassed and sometimes physically assaulted just for doing their jobs. Social media, as you probably know, has been a breeding ground for bullying, hate speech, and dehumanizing rhetoric rather than a place to build connection and sincere understanding. Workplaces continue to ignore toxic behaviors that damage mental health and, as research increasingly shows, can literally reduce the lifespan of its employees. Bad faith actors, trafficking in misinformation and disinformation are deepening our divisions, contaminating our discourse, and reducing the faith of goodness in our fellow humans. On a personal note, I was at one of my daughter's sports games a little while ago, and an out-of-control parent of a kid on the other team started cursing out and threatening the referee over a call that did not go in his daughter's favor. Afterward, this dude feels like it would be a good idea to wait in the parking lot after the game to challenge the ref to a fight. Seriously? We're at a place where grown adults are willing to square up in a parking lot over a missed call in a sports game between children. Here's what's wild about this. People think this insanity is normal. There are countless people who will hear all of this and shrug their shoulders and say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. That's the world we're living in these days. Thoughts and prayers. Screw that. We need to stop confusing what's common with what's normal. Are you good with living in a world like this? Or for any parents who are listening to the sound of my voice, are you good with leaving this dumpster fire for your kids to extinguish after you're gone? I'm not. At the risk of being an alarmist, I'm going to sound the alarm. I cannot say this enough. The consequences of unchecked incivility and unkindness are severe and very far-reaching. Rising rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges, increased social isolation and loneliness as people withdraw from these uncomfortable and toxic interactions. Politically speaking, a decline in community engagement and democratic participation, workplace toxicity leading to burnout, decreased productivity, and watching the best talent in your organization chuck up the deuces as they walk out the front door. The normalization of bullying, harassment, and discrimination as being the price of living in our current existence. Most alarmingly, and quite frankly to me, most important, is the loss of faith in the goodness of humanity itself. Here's the thing, y'all. When kindness erodes, our ability to solve complex problems erodes with it. If we can't talk to each other with respect, how can we possibly work together on things that matter, like political compromise or economic inequality or racial justice or healing our divided families or any of the other pressing challenges that require collaborative solutions? I'll answer that for you. We can't. Not effectively anyway. This isn't a game, y'all. But if it was a game, we're in the fourth quarter and we're losing. The good news is that the game isn't over yet, but we're going to need a clever shift in our game plan if we want kindness to make a comeback. This podcast, the Kindness Extremist podcast, is my best effort to jumpstart those comeback efforts. Obviously, I cannot orchestrate this comeback alone. So if you listen to this podcast so far, clearly you're a kindness extremist too. And I'm so glad you're here because there's a lot of hard and thankfully deeply fulfilling work ahead. The work begins in the next episode. But for now, thank you for allowing me to introduce myself. Thank you for allowing me to share my dream of a kinder world with you. And most importantly, thank you for hopefully accepting my invitation to join me as we do the important work of healing our world together. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness cannot be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, friends, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.